The station's alarm chimed for the third time that cycle, a polite, almost apologetic sound that suggested even the machine was embarrassed to interrupt anyone again. The human soldier silenced it with the flat of his hand and muttered that if the station ever came under real attack, it would probably ask the invaders to fill out a form first. The corridor lights flickered as if laughing at him. He adjusted the insignia on his uniform, already crooked from a long shift, and checked the schedule hovering in his retinal display. Cultural liaison briefing. Again. He considered faking a mild radiation rash, but the medical AI had already warned him that lying to it was statistically pointless. She was already there when he entered the briefing room, seated with her legs crossed, long ears angled backward in what he had learned, after several embarrassing misunderstandings, meant mild impatience rather than aggression. She looked human enough that new arrivals often did a double take, and different enough that no one ever forgot she was. When she saw him, one ear twitched forward, the other lagging behind, and she smiled as if the station itself were an inside joke only they shared. "You're late," she said, her translator implant smoothing her voice into perfect galactic standard, though it stubbornly refused to adjust for sarcasm. "I prefer to think of it as arriving dramatically," he replied. "Builds character. Mine mostly." Her ears shifted, a gesture he had come to recognize as amusement. "Your character appears to require constant maintenance." He dropped into the chair opposite her and activated the table display. It immediately projected a rotating map of contested star systems, then froze, then rotated upside down. He stared at it. "See, even the station's confused about which way is up. Relatable." She leaned closer and tapped the display, correcting it with a practiced motion. "This station was built by 3 species who couldn't agree on gravity standards. Confusion is its natural state." "That explains a lot," he said, "including why the coffee tastes like regret." They were supposed to review protocols for joint patrols, but the conversation drifted, as it often did, into small talk disguised as professional efficiency. She corrected his pronunciation of her name for the 5th time that week, and he pretended he would remember this time. He asked whether her ears ever got cold in vacuum-adjacent corridors, and she told him that if humans had functional ears, they might ask fewer stupid questions. He accepted this as fair criticism. Outside the room, a patrol drone clanged against the wall, apologized in 6 languages, and drifted away. She watched it go. "Your machines are very polite," she said. "They apologize more than my entire species." "Yeah," he said. "We programmed them that way after one tried to arrest an admiral for breathing too loudly." Her laughter surprised him every time, not because it was strange, but because it was so familiar. It felt like something that shouldn't exist in a place balanced on treaties and weapons and unspoken threats. The galaxy beyond the station was restless. Everyone knew it. The maps said so. The rumors said so. Even the station's artificial intelligence, which claimed not to have opinions, had started running probability models labeled simply, "Not great." They finished the briefing late or early, depending on which chronometer one trusted. As they stood, she hesitated, ears tilting sideways. "There is a reception later," she said. "Diplomatic, mandatory enjoyment." He groaned. "Last time, I accidentally insulted an ambassador's entire reproductive cycle." "You said their offspring resembled overcooked fruit." "In my defense, they asked for honesty." She smiled again. "Come anyway. If nothing else, your mistakes provide valuable cultural data." "Happy to serve," he said, and meant more than just the joke. They walked together through the corridor, their steps syncing without effort. A group of off-duty pilots passed them, whispering not very quietly. One of them stared at her ears, then at him, then shook his head as if the universe had personally offended him. The soldier caught her glance and shrugged. "Ignore them. They're just jealous you don't need a helmet hair excuse." "My people would consider helmet hair a tragedy," she said. "We have entire operas about less." At the intersection where their paths diverged, she stopped. "Human soldier," she said, formal now, teasing gone. "Do you ever wonder why this station exists?" He thought about it. To keep us from shooting each other while we argue about who gets which star. "Yes," she said, "and also to remind us that proximity changes things. It is harder to hate someone when you know how they drink their coffee." He smiled. "Then we're doomed. I put sugar in mine." Her ears flattened in mock horror. Monstrous. They parted, but the station didn't let the moment go. As he walked back to his quarters, his wrist console pinged with a message from Central Command, full of coded language that translated roughly to "prepare yourself." He sighed and leaned against the wall, feeling the hum of the station through his boots. He thought of her smile, the way her ears betrayed emotions she tried to hide, the ease with which humor bridged gaps entire fleets couldn't. Later, at the reception, gravity shifted mid-toast, sending drinks floating and dignitaries flailing. He caught her hand without thinking, anchoring them both to a railing. She laughed, hair drifting, ears streaming behind her like banners. "Your station is trying to kill us," she said. "Only a little," he replied. "It does that when it feels ignored." They stood there, surrounded by chaos, diplomats shouting, translators malfunctioning, a song from someone's culture playing at half speed. For a moment, none of it mattered. The galaxy was still divided, still dangerous, still on the brink of something unnamed. But between a human soldier and an alien woman with long ears, there was space enough for a joke, a shared breath, and the quiet, unsettling realization that some borders were already being crossed. The station woke him with a message that began with the words "procedural irregularity" and ended with a request that he please not panic. He considered panicking anyway, out of spite, but the ceiling lights brightened in a way that suggested the station was watching him closely. He rolled out of the bunk, his boots finding the floor just as artificial gravity hiccuped and then corrected itself, as if clearing its throat. Somewhere deep in the hull, something large adjusted its position with a sound like a thoughtful animal. By the time he reached the command ring, the irregularity had already become a situation. Screens were alive with data streams, star charts folding and unfolding like nervous origami. Officers clustered in small groups, arguing quietly, loudly, and in at least one case, interpretively. He slipped into his station and scanned the alert summary. A foreign vessel had dropped out of slipspace too close to the border, close enough to make several treaties start sweating. She arrived moments later, ears high and alert, uniform immaculate in a way his never managed to be. She took in the room, the tension, the barely contained chaos, and leaned toward him. "On a scale from 1 to planetary evacuation, how bad is it?" "Somewhere between misplaced paperwork and everyone screaming," he said. "So Tuesday." Her mouth twitched. "Good, I was worried it might be serious." They were assigned joint oversight, which in practice meant standing next to each other, while admirals pretended not to notice how often they exchanged glances. The foreign vessel hailed them, its transmission resolving into a flickering image of an envoy whose species communicated primarily through color changes. The translator lagged, announcing diplomatic intent several seconds after the envoy had already finished speaking. "He says they come in peace," she murmured. The envoy turned a violent shade of orange. "And now he says we smell like burnt metal," she added. "I believe that is an idiom." The soldier leaned forward. "We apologize for the aroma, it's a cultural thing." The envoy pulsed uncertainly, then settled into a calmer hue. Negotiations began, stalled, restarted, detoured into a heated debate about navigational beacons, and somehow ended with an agreement to share sensor data. When the transmission cut, the room exhaled as one. "See," the soldier said. "Diplomacy, easy." She tilted her head. "Your definition of easy concerns me." Afterward, they found themselves in the station's observation corridor, stars sliding past in slow, indifferent silence. She rested her hands on the rail, ears relaxed now, drifting slightly with the hum of the station. "My people would say this encounter was a warning," she said. "Borders grow thinner." Humans would say that's been true since we invented borders, he replied. She considered him, then laughed softly. You make heavy things lighter. Occupational hazard, he said. If I didn't joke, I'd have to think. And thinking is dangerous. Extremely. They talked longer than protocol allowed. About her homeworld's twin moons and the festival's time to their alignment. About his first deployment, when his armor had been 3 sizes too big, and his commanding officer had mistaken fear for enthusiasm. They shared stories the way one shares contraband, cautiously at first, then with growing boldness. A maintenance drone interrupted them, projecting a warning about unauthorized loitering. She stared at it. We are authorized to exist. The drone processed this. Authorization unclear, it said. Please continue existing elsewhere. He laughed. Even the machines are judgmental. They moved on, but the conversation stayed with them, trailing like static. Later, during a routine patrol simulation, a glitch paired them in a shared neural interface meant for emergency coordination. The sudden closeness was disorienting, thoughts brushing thoughts, impressions bleeding through. He caught flashes of color that meant amusement, curiosity, something warmer he didn't have a word for. She felt his reflexive humor, the way he used it as armor, and something quieter beneath. They disengaged at once, both breathing a little too fast. Well, he said, that was efficient. Her ears were flushed, a sign he had learned meant embarrassment. Our protocols did not cover that. No kidding. They avoided each other for exactly 6 minutes, which might have been a record. When they spoke again, it was with forced normalcy, jokes slightly sharper, laughter slightly delayed. The galaxy, meanwhile, refused to wait. Reports came in of fleet movements, of alliances shifting like sand under pressure. The station's AI began recommending contingency plans with increasing enthusiasm. One evening, as alarms tested themselves yet again, he found her in the small garden module, surrounded by plants imported from half a dozen worlds. She was tending one that responded to touch with bioluminescent pulses. She looked up when he entered, ears lifting. I was told this helps with stress, she said. The plant disagrees. He sat beside her. It's probably just shy. They watched the light ripple through the leaves. There are things my people do not joke about, she said quietly. Commitment, bonds, promises. He nodded, suddenly aware of how easily he joked about everything. Humans joke about them constantly, he said. Usually because we're afraid to take them seriously. She smiled at that, a small, thoughtful expression. Perhaps that is why we find you confusing. Story of my life, he said. The station lights dimmed to simulate night, stars brightening beyond the viewport. Somewhere, engines spooled, diplomats argued, and borders tightened. Between them there was no protocol, no translator, no clear line to follow. Just words, humor, and a growing sense that something irreversible was already in motion, laughing softly at their attempts to pretend otherwise. The message reached him in the middle of a joke. He was telling himself about how the universe waited for the least convenient moment to be sincere. His wrist console vibrated, then vibrated again, then escalated to a level of urgency normally reserved for incoming asteroids or extremely offended admirals. He silenced it with a sigh and glanced at the sender. Her designation, official channel, personal encryption layered beneath. That combination never meant anything simple. He found her where the station's gravity softened slightly, a quirk left over from incompatible engineering philosophies. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, ears angled not forward, not back, but somewhere in between, a position he had never seen before and immediately distrusted. You look like someone about to explain something that will end with paperwork, he said. She breathed out, a controlled release. I am about to explain something that will end with consequences. Worse, he said. Okay, I'm listening. They sat. The station hummed. Somewhere far away, a warning light flickered and thought better of it. She spoke slowly, choosing each word as if it might detonate if mishandled, about her people's laws. about bonds that were not symbolic but literal, biological, neural, permanent, about how commitment was not declared but enacted, and how once enacted, it rewrote who you were allowed to be. He made a small, helpless sound. So no pressure then. Her mouth curved despite herself. You reduce the unbearable with humor. It is effective. I've been practicing since childhood. She told him what it would cost her. Exile, technically voluntary, socially absolute. A severing from the communal resonance her species shared. A silence where there had always been connection. She told him what it would cost him. Legal non-recognition, altered neural patterns, obligations that no human institution could interpret. A life lived slightly out of phase with his own species. He stared at the floor. I once panicked because I had to choose between two kinds of boots, he said. This feels unfair. She reached out, hesitated, then rested her hand on his. It is not a demand, she said. It is an answer to something you said. He laughed, abrupt and shaky. Figures. I finally say something honest and the universe hands me a dissertation. The station interrupted them with impeccable timing. An alert bloomed across the air, fleets moving, treaties collapsing into footnotes. War, or something close enough that arguing about definitions felt pointless. The border they lived on was about to become a line people died for. They were pulled into motion, into meetings and commands and decisions that mattered too much. He watched her navigate it all with calm precision, ears signaling to those who could read them, voice steady even as the galaxy lurched. He realized, somewhere between orders and alarms, that he had stopped hiding behind jokes quite so often. He still used them, but now they were bridges, not walls. When the crisis broke, not resolved, never that, but diverted, delayed, downgraded to a future problem, the station felt hollowed out. Relief moved through it like a tired animal. They found each other again as they always did. So, he said, leaning against the wall, end of the galaxy postponed. Want to talk about us ruining our lives? She laughed, a sound that made the station's sensors briefly misinterpret happiness as a minor system malfunction. Your phrasing is deeply romantic. Working on it. They talked through everything they hadn't dared say before. He admitted fear without disguising it as humor. She admitted longing without translating it into duty. They argued, gently, fiercely, about whether love was supposed to be sensible. They joked about filing joint tax returns across species. They imagined futures that bent around reality instead of breaking against it. In the end, the choice did not feel like a choice so much as a recognition of who they were when they were honest, of what proximity had already changed. The station's AI required confirmation, legal waivers, biological scans, and a strongly worded disclaimer about unforeseen outcomes. He signed everything with a grin that was not entirely steady. She placed her hand against the interface, ears lifted, expression serene. When it was done, the universe did not explode. Borders did not vanish. The station hummed on. But something fundamental shifted, quiet and immense. Later, much later, they stood together in the observation corridor. Stars moved as they always had, indifferent and beautiful. He felt different, not less human, but more aware of what that meant. She stood slightly apart from the resonance of her people now, but not alone. So, he said, married across species, slightly outlawed, mildly terrifying future. Any regrets? She considered, ears tilting in a way he now understood meant contentment. Only that you still put sugar in your coffee. He laughed, genuine and unarmored. We all have our flaws. They watched the galaxy together, not united by treaties or stations or laws, but by a promise that had rewritten them both. And for once, that felt like enough.